Have you ever woke up one day and had a completely random question? Well, on January 20th, 2023, I decided to ask, what will speedrunning look like in 10 years from now? It was a decent enough thought to provoke responses from quite a few people, and I have gathered 5 predictions from all of this, so let's talk about it. Before I start, I just want to say, a lot of this is hypothetical, and is just for fun. No one can accurately predict every single thing that will happen in the future, and this simply is a silly topic that I want to make guesses with by using my knowledge of being in the community for 8 years now. Anyways, now that I've addressed generic commenter 458, let's get into the actual content. Number 1. Emulation is the norm. Older consoles are becoming harder and harder to find, they're breaking down, they're becoming more expensive, and they will become a less viable option for many people as the years continue on. Would you rather pay $50, $100, maybe even way more for a console setup on top of buying a capture card with the right cables, or instead, simply firing up an emulator and maybe at most paying for a controller if you don't want to use a keyboard? I think you see where I'm getting at here. Emulation inevitably will be more and more the first option for many people, and it already is for some. For certain systems, it's already a no-brainer to simply fire up an emulator instead. Sure, you can theoretically cough up the money for any system you want on eBay, but is that realistic? I already mentioned cost, but what about simply the increased scarcity of systems, nonetheless those that are in working condition? Yeah, you see those videos where people with the know-how buy cheap broken systems and they fix them, and those are cool, but I can tell you personally I cannot do that. While the discussion of emulation does get more and more divisive the further you move up in console generations, a lot of this comes down to constant innovations and improvements. Nowadays, you get people that can make emulators for systems not too far after their initial launch, and for older consoles, their emulation is getting more and more accurate. Understandably, emulation as a whole will never be 100% accurate, but I would not be shocked if less games over time ban emulators and start making exceptions by at least making separate category tabs, which some games have already been doing. At the very least, emulation for the most part on older consoles between the 70s and 90s are widely accepted due to their generally high accuracy. As time moves on, I would not be shocked to see this happen to slightly newer consoles. Number 2. Reaching the human limit. With speedrunning's core focus being to push the boundaries in ways never seen before, there will come a point where tons of notable runs will get harder to push. I know it's a cheap example, but Super Mario Bros. Any% is probably the easiest example. As of making this, there is only time to be saved in 2 more levels, 4-2 and 8-4. On an individual level basis, humans have already maxed out the fastest time, and have gotten closer and closer over the years to doing this in larger segments. Regarding 4-2, the last time save here is Lightning 4-2, and is very much going to be done in a future record. The question is just when. With how easy it has become in comparison to where it was even a year or 2 ago, I predict that this could happen as early as 2023 or 2024, depending on how motivated people are to push this. In regards to 8-4, well, unlike every other level on the run, every single frame counts here. This leads to a very low probability of this level being perfected in the record anytime soon. The only reason I can't say it's impossible is cause it isn't. Like I said, the perfect 8-4 has been done in an individual level run, but you'd have to be crazy right now to go for a perfect 8-4 in a full proper speedrun. While it may be hard to estimate the possibility of 8-4 being perfected in a real run, I think it's safe to predict that once 4-2 is maxed out, there will eventually be a roadblock in 8-4. I predict that there will be a specific 8-4 time that runners post 4-2 era will max out at in runs. And if that does get pushed further, it'll take a completely new roster of motivated individuals to try and go for the impossible. I feel like out of all my points, this is the most realistic. That's just how speedrunning goes. Many top runners of a game eventually are simply done, or get tired of a specific run, or even just lose interest in the sport in general. It took a whole new generation of runners to go from 455 to 454 in Super Mario Bros., and you could give plenty of other examples for any game with a decent enough history. Anyways, I kinda lost track of what I wanted to cover here. I mostly say all of this because I believe there eventually will be runners that will shift their focus to runs that may not be thought of as seriously right now, but maybe they will tomorrow. With the existence of miscellaneous categories and category extension leaderboards, you'll probably see an increased interest in previously less thought of runs, simply due to them being less optimized than their more well-known counterparts. Number 3. The future of AI. With a prediction about the future, it's not that surprising that one of the first things people thought of was the usage of AI, or artificial intelligence. AI by far has been one of the most advancing technologies, and within the last few years of making this video, has done things that I previously would have never imagined when I was younger. Now I've seen people go as far as saying that AI will go above and beyond and straight up find optimal routes for runs, or even just straight up finish runs on its own, but is that too optimistic? To be fair, if you asked me 10 years ago what I would have expected overall AI to do by 2023, I would have been far off. Most likely because I was an 11-year-old that mainly cared about Minecraft, but anyways, this is another topic I can't pinpoint too well. I feel like the closest thing I can compare to currently is Seth Bling's Mario project that kickstarted back in 2015. Through machine learning, he was able to teach it to play parts of Super Mario Bros., Super Mario World, and later additionally had a couple more projects, MariFlow and MariQ, which he has used for Super Mario Kart. Could these sorts of projects evolve enough to go as far as turning a computer into a speedrunner? Maybe? But I personally feel like no matter what, there will always be a human element that a computer will never be able to fully emulate. I feel like for now the most realistic prediction may come from those I mentioned previously. AI may become a reliable supplemental tool for brute forcing route and glitch discoveries, but I personally do not see it evolving further past that point. How much do you think computers will take over in speedrunning? Number 4. Community shift. This point is probably the weakest of the bunch, and I don't feel too much one way here, but I feel like it's at least worth talking about the speedrun community as a whole. As communities evolve and grow, they naturally become way bigger than previously imagined. I bet a ton of the OGs from the early 2000s had zero clue what speedrunning would turn into even just a decade later. Trying to talk about communities from an overhead view is quite interesting, and honestly, there are probably a lot of different routes I could go here, but I'll just spew what I first thought of. The first is, how segmented will speedrunning become? I'm not even sure if that makes sense, but hear me out. In one way or another, speedrunning has been very split since day one, since naturally, not everyone is interested in the same games, and also, the internet used to be way more separated in the early 2000s. Some of the more broad communities I can speak off the top of my head are Mario, PlayStation games, Flash games. I could keep going on, but while tons of these communities do come together to an extent, fun fact, I do talk to people who don't run Mario, there is no doubt they are still fractured in some way or another. I would say over the last decade, thanks to events like Games Done Quick, and sites such as Speedruns Live and Speedrun.com, that in general, speedrunning communities have become more connected than ever. Additionally, thanks to widespread social media as a whole, sub-communities such as those in a different region, i.e. North America and Japan, have increasingly been able to communicate in ways faster than ever before. If you take a step back 10 years ago, you may be looking at completely different leaderboards depending on what language you may have spoken. That may sound weird to new runners, but it's true. So with all that, you may be wondering, what am I really asking here? My curious thought is, will there be a point where speedrunning gets so big that we start to see communities crawl a bit more into their own corners and flourish further that way like they did 20 years ago? That may sound weird to ask, but I've heard other people ask similar questions. Personally, I think the opposite will happen. I believe with the constant increase in social media connecting us further and further together, the community as a whole will continue to become more globalized. One of the core reasons I believe speedrunning has blown up so much is that the general community has had a wider appeal to all sorts of audiences and has become more accessible than ever. I really think that if it wasn't the case, then I would not have the YouTube channel I have today. At the very least, I feel like it's safe to say that speedrunning as a whole has been becoming a more serious sport and will only be legitimized more over time. Where do you think the speedrun community will be in the future? Number 5. A shift in platforms. At some point, platforms and mediums that are widely used tend to either drastically shift or die out after a certain period of time. So what does this mean for speedrunning? Well, I feel like the obvious first component is the places where runs are hosted and viewed. First, there is the leaderboard component. Speedrun.com has gotten closer to surviving for a full decade already, but will it still exist in another 10 years from now? You may have seen my controversial video, The Day Speedrun.com Died, and this is what I had to say. I seriously think by the end of 2023, that Speedrun.com at the very least will have some very serious competition. Was I completely wrong here? At this rate, probably yes. I will admit I was quite harsh in that video, but I still think more needs to change with speedrun leaderboards. There still is a potential for another platform to swoop in, but who knows when. There is leaderboards.gg, but I've been waiting to see more come out of that for quite a while, so I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. No matter what, I expect the leaderboards we use today to be completely different in the next decade. If you go back to 2012, communities were mostly hosting leaderboards on wikis or spreadsheets, and while some still do that, it's safe to say that most don't swing that way anymore. There's also the factor of, where will people host the videos of the runs themselves? The most obvious one to talk about first is YouTube. Will people be watching this video in 10 years from now on this platform? Google very successfully has been able to ingrain YouTube into a permanent de facto video host, but will that completely change? No matter what, I feel like it's safe to say that the platform will not come close to full on dying due to how much the site has become ingrained into the internet, but will its popularity somehow sway? The likelihood of a platform changing increases way more if you start going down the list. For example, while Twitch in many ways has been able to keep itself as a top game streaming platform, they obviously aren't YouTube. It doesn't help that Twitch has constant issues with video hosting that YouTube has had nothing close to dealing with, so I'm not shocked that even main Twitch users upload all of their content onto YouTube as well. I honestly don't have enough knowledge to know which platform is best at serving what purpose, but I would not be shocked if other platforms come in to try and replace the bigger hosts we know today. It's already happened in the past many times. You probably just forgot about them, or just never heard about them to begin with. Moderating tons of runs, I've definitely seen my fair share of unique platforms, and that list will probably only grow. I was honestly surprised more recently to see some really short runs submitted via TikTok. That's not a sentence I expected to ever say. I honestly can make a whole video just on this one point, but I'll spare you the rest. Where do you think people will be submitting and uploading runs as times change? And there you have it. Those are 5 huge topics that I think will be relevant to the evolution of speedrunning over the next decade. Honestly, there were many more points I wanted to bring up, but I at least gave you what I personally feel are the most relevant and have been the most discussed. Is there a future speedrun concern you think I missed? Or do you think I completely missed the mark on what I said? Let me know in the comments below, or on any of my socials. Until next time, stay safe, and thank you for watching.